we're making delicious naan in the pizza oven. The great thing about cooking in the pizza oven is this thing gets up to the same temperatures as a tandoor oven. So we're right on par with an Indian restaurant. I'm going to be sharing with you some of the tips and techniques I have found along the way to make the most thin, soft, and bubbly naan you've ever had. But first, it starts with the recipe for the naan. I have been tweaking and messing around with this recipe to get it to where it finally is. If you already have a naan recipe you like, go ahead and just skip ahead to the tips and tricks because I still think it'd be really beneficial. So let's start with the recipe. All of the amounts are going to be listed in the description below. I'll quickly walk you through what I do. So we got flour and baking powder. I like to mix them first. Once you got it all mixed up, go ahead with the wet ingredients. We've got some milk, water, salt, which is a dry ingredient, but it dissolves better in the water. Hold please, I gotta go get some sugar. Sugar and 1 egg. And then I like to go ahead and mix that up. Okay, and once we got that mixed up, go ahead and add the dry ingredients. You can go ahead and mix this by hand. I'm just doing it in the KitchenAid because it's super easy. And since this doesn't have any yeast in it, and this isn't a bread dough, we don't need to really knead it for too long. And I've done recipes with yeast. I just like the baking powder a little bit more. I've personally noticed with the yeast, the bread grows quite a bit more than I'd like. And also, the dough ends up, well, actually the naan ends up a little bit more chewy and hard to pull apart. Whereas with the baking powder, it just pulls right apart and it doesn't have that chewiness that I don't like. So let's go ahead and mix this up. Okay, our naan, our dough is ready to go. Okay, and I just like to plop it out on the table. And now what I do is with this recipe, this amount, I'm able to get about 9 95-gram dough balls, which are a really good size for a 12-inch peel. So I get out a scale, got a cookie sheet here, spray a little oil on it so it doesn't stick, and I'll just go through and get, that's 93, that's pretty close, 96, okay. And then I just ball it up, nice little ball, and repeat 9 times. Once we got all our dough balls ready, I like to cover them so they don't dry out. And generally, I'll put them in like the oven on a proof setting or just leave them out at room temperature for a bit and let the flour hydrate. There isn't any yeast in here, so it's not like it's gonna grow significantly, but it is nice when it warms up a bit. It makes it a little more elastic and easy to work with. So I usually let it sit for a half hour to 60 minutes. Let's go ahead and start rolling some of these out. And the technique I've landed on is using oil to roll them out. And here's why. I've done it with flour. When I did it with flour, it kept shriveling up, and I had to keep rolling it and rolling it and rolling it. And it finally stretched out. It just took significantly longer. I'll show you right now just a fast forward of oil versus flour, and you can see how much quicker the oil is than the flour. And they're both sped up at the same speed, so you can see. Also, we're gonna end up oiling the top of it later, and I'll go into detail on that. So this actually does help us in that way. So here's what I do. You can get just normal vegetable oil or spray. I find the spray a little easier. It gets a nice even coat. And then I'll spray the top as well. Get a rolling pin. This isn't pizza dough, okay? We don't need a crust. And you're just gonna work on rolling it out. Okay, and that right there is an example of what happens when you don't let it sit for 30 minutes. This is the dough we just made, and it's shriveling back up. So that right there is testament of letting it rest. In terms of cooking the naan, I've gone through a lot of trial and error. I started off with just rolling it out with flour, launching it with the peel, but it always seemed just to be a little too thick. Most naan I've had at restaurants is nice and thin, and that's how I like it. So I've tried over and over. I took a little turning peel and bent it, and then I'd take a smaller naan and stick it on there, and then I'd come in the pizza oven and just flip it over, and that worked well, but it's a lot of work. The peel ends up getting hot, then it's hard to get the dough on it. The other iteration I've done is taking a pizza peel and actually putting the dough in there, letting it cook partially, taking it out, flipping it, and then launching it, which is also more work. So this technique I find to be the easiest. So we've rolled out our dough. It's nice and thin. The oil has helped it spread out, but also still stick a bit, which is what we want. But this top part is gonna be sticky on the peel. So I add a little bit of flour and just spread it out and just feel for any sticky spots, just really quick, because we do not want it sticking to the peel. So no sticky spots, we're good to go there. Now let's go ahead and flip it over, transfer it to our peel. You can see that's just about the right size for this size of a peel. And now the trick is, there's already some oil here, but I like to add just a little bit more. I'll show you right now a comparison with, on the left, this naan is not oiled on top. The one on the right is oiled. And you can see the one on the right gets these nice little bubbles, poofing up pretty quick. But the naan overall isn't getting huge. The flour one, it's getting big bubbles and it's growing really big. You can even see on another comparison here, when I was cooking them on the peel, you can see again, on the right is with the oil, nice little bubbles, developing really nicely, whereas without the oil, you just get a few bigger bubbles. So I always make sure I add just a little bit more. And in terms of the pizza oven, I like to make sure it's about 850. Which we're a little hot, but we'll deal with it. Let's try it out. Okay, I like to launch it around 850, and then I'll turn the flame down. I've noticed if I keep it on high, especially in some of the hotter pizza ovens, it will burn some of the spots. So just to make it a little safer from burning, I turn it down to about middle or low, just depends on your pizza oven. And that is not free flowing. It's a little bit stuck. Okay, and just like a pizza, you want to make sure it's not stuck anywhere. If it is, add just a little bit of flour. Okay, we're good there. So let's go ahead and launch. And just like a pizza, keep an eye on it. You can see that those little bubbles developing. You want to give it just a little bit of time before turning it. I'd say that's looking pretty good. So I like to cook it till the bubbles get browned. You don't want to get them too black, but you can see, look at that beautiful bubble development there. And the great thing is how it just breaks apart effortlessly. So right when I get it out, I like to get a little butter and brush it on. That adds a ton of delicious flavor. And then this thing is ready to eat. You can dip it in some of your favorite curries. One of my kids' favorite, cinnamon sugar. Great little treat. Or my personal favorite, garlic naan. Just take a few chopped up garlic, spread them out. The more the garlic you like, the more you should be throwing on here. And again with this one, we still need to pan it. Then I just take a few cilantro leaves, put them on. I'm gonna cook it just like the others. Oh yes. And there is our beautiful garlic naan. Again, top it with butter. Eat it as it is. Dip it in some delicious homemade curry, which I've got a butter chicken recipe on here that knock your socks off. The garlic naan is so good that I couldn't even wait to record before eating it. You've got to try this recipe. It is delicious. I have tried so many iterations of this, and this is where I finally landed on the best way to make naan in a pizza oven.